So let's talk about lettering. So for this blog and tutorial, I wanted to show you guys my favorite stitches for doing some lettering. You can obviously see what stitches we're going to cover written there. So to get started, I just wrote out the words in my own handwriting, and then I used my copier to double the size, and then I used the light transfer method to transfer my design, the lettering there, onto my fabric in the hoop. So you can see I used the water-soluble pen. I just put my hoop up to a window and traced my writing there. Pretty simple. I didn't write it large initially just because my handwriting only looks nice when it's small. So that's why I did it that way. And there's the colors. I decided to use that variegated thread is from Lycian Cosmo. It's called Seasons. It's their variegated line. So I usually get questions about that. And then the floss that I added is just DMC that matched it. So, all right, let's get started. So let's go ahead and start at the top with the back stitch. So for back stitch, you're going to start a stitch length away from the top of your line. Come up. Go back to the top of your line there for your first stitch. And then repeat. Go a stitch length away. And then come back in. You're going to go through that same hole that you originally came up. If you don't do that, you're going to have a little gap between your between your stitches. You don't want that. So here I'm doing a straight line to start this B. So this stitch length works okay for that. Once I start doing curves, I'm going to have to make my stitch length a little bit smaller. It's really up to you how small you like to do your stitches. You know, the smaller the stitch, the more stitches you're going to have to do, but also the more precise you can be with curves. So here I'm going to start curving. Also, I'm using a full strand of floss here. If you want a thinner line, you could definitely use fewer strands. So instead of the 6 that I am using, you could use half of that. You could use just a single strand if you want a really thin line. If you're doing smaller font, you may want to do fewer strands. It might get too bulky using a full ply. Alternatively, if you want a thicker line and still want to do the back stitch, you could always double up. So you could do, it would be a total of 12 ply. That's it. I don't know if you guys want to keep watching or not. It's going to be pretty repetitive. So as far as what to do with your thread on the back, so you can see obviously up here I'm going to kind of run into a dead end, right? And then I need to start working on my A. I don't worry too much about that. I usually don't use fabrics where it's going to show if I carry. So I just go for it. I just move my needle where it needs to go next, you know. Look at me, I'm cheating. So when I'm at the end of a line, you could see I was about to do a forward stitch instead of a back stitch. Because who's going to know the difference? Sometimes I like to do a forward stitch at the end and also at the very beginning too, because it doesn't matter. So here, if I start at the top of my A with a forward stitch, sometimes I do that. I don't know why. And then I start doing the back stitch. No one's gonna know. Boots is here. Hey, Boots. So that's that. And you can see I just carried my floss over. Okay, I have a bonky kitty. I'm gonna pause here, and then I'll show you what this looks like when I'm all done. I wanted to show you what I'm doing here at the top of my K. You see I have a little swirly kind of loopy top here. So I used to try to like fit in an extra stitch at the top here, like I guess it would be like parallel to the line here of my clamp, but that's silly. It just makes a mess. So what I do is I just did this stitch at the top, and I'm just gonna do another stitch to meet it. Like I thought I needed a third stitch in there. I don't know why, but it just got really bulky. I was trying to make it more round, I think. So I just go up and down, just up, down, without having a extra little stitch in there to change directions. I can show you that again here because I have another loop coming up. And right here where I'm going over my previous stitches, I'm just gonna go over my previous stitches. It kind of creates a 3D look. There we go. I'll just do one more stitch here at the bottom before going back up. Oh my gosh, my cat. I need to kick her out of here. It's ridiculous. Okay, so here it's back up, high boots. And this one's a little more wide. It's like a little more circular, so I may actually do an extra stitch. Let's see. Rather than more of like a V, have it be more of like a U. So here's like that end of the loop stitch, and then I'll come back down. But that's just practice as far as how many stitches you can fit, if it ends up looking too bulky, if there's any way you can minimize it. Okay. So here I'm gonna just kind of start fresh down here. And do I have enough floss? It's not always the way. Like you're at the very end of something. Oopsies. There we go. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be really tight if at all. Nope. Well, I'm gonna finish this off and grab another color because I want to show you something else you can do with this back stitch. Okay, I finished up, so now I'm going to actually whip this back stitch as another option. Rather than writing out whipped back stitch for you, I'm just gonna go ahead and whip the back stitch example. So I'm gonna come up through the very top of my stitching there, and I'm just gonna start whipping. So when you do this, you're not actually piercing the fabric anymore. You're just kind of looping all of your stitches. And you want to be consistent with how you're doing it. So I'm going over from left to right, and then under from right to left. And sometimes it helps to actually move your hoop around when you do this, especially when you're going around curves like this, so that you don't get confused as far as what's up and what's down and what's left and what's right. And of course I'm at awkward angles now. Usually I would not have my hoop clamped. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, I gotta go from this side with my left hand. Oh, that's just a mess. Okay. Ah, I got it. So that's what it looks like whipped. So obviously that's fun to do with another color, because then you get this kind of striped two-tone look. Okay, I cannot do it from this angle, my friends. I think you understand. I would just keep going around, and I would probably start from here and keep going. So that's what that looks like. Pretty fun, huh? Or you could always do it with the same color to kind of smooth out your back stitch. Awesome. Okay, so I just want to show another thing you can do with backstitch for some more fun lettering. You can see here I have my outline a little bit. Here's what I used. So I am not a hand letterer at all, but I did want to show you how to do this. So please go to other people for hand lettering tutorials for sure. But I just took my other writing and I traced it on another piece of paper and pencil, and then I kind of played with it where I wanted some of it to be thick and some of it to be thin, and kind of like calligraphy. Came up with this, and so I transferred it here. So I just want to show you how you can use backstitch for some more fun lettering like this. So what I'm going to do is just use backstitch to outline the shapes. I'll just do the B, and later on I'll follow up with the other letters, but here's a start. Oh my goodness. There we go. So just basic oh my gosh, there. Basic backstitch around the shape, doing the outline. All right, so here I am. I made it all the way around. I did my outline. And actually, I think this looks cool just as it is. I know you don't have to fill it in. I think this is a cool effect. Or you could fill it in with a different color. I'm going to fill it in with purple. So I'm just going to follow along with more backstitch, using backstitch to fill in the spaces here. You can see here for this row that I'm going down, I'm kind of staggering with the backstitch that I'm stitching up against. Or you can have them line up so that all the stitches are aligned. It's really up to you. Like it's just gonna look random the way I'm doing it right now, which is fine. That's what I'm going for, just filled. So I'm at the bottom, and I'm just gonna go back up the other side. And obviously it's not gonna be perfectly even. I'm, filling in kind of an irregular shape. So if you have some stitches in there that aren't technically backstitched, don't worry about it. You're just filling the shape. Ta-da! So obviously I would just continue filling in here and finish up with the rest of the letters, but pretty sure you got the point by now. So let's go ahead and look at the next stitch we can use, which is stem stitch. Okay, so I just want to demo something really quick for you about the stem stitch. So if I come up here with my floss, I'm going to hold this this excess thread to the side. We'll kind of leave a loop and then come up in the middle of this stitch, and then I'm going to pull. Okay, so there's one stitch. I'm going to keep going. So the side that I have this little loop on is going to be important as I go around curves. So right now, this is good. It's working with the curve. But if you look at this S shape that I'm filling, if let's say you were like a little flea on this S and you were kind of like walking along here, you're kind of turning to the left, and then once you got up here, you'd be turning to the right. So you're changing, there's a change in direction right here, right? Basically here it's straight. So there's something that happens there. a change of direction. So what's going to happen is that this stem stitch is going to kind of get weird over there unless you change the stitch. At least that's how I do it. Instead of holding this excess floss on this side, so I'm holding it on the right to turn left if I was that little flea, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be turning right, so I'm going to hold my floss on the left. I think that technically changes the stitch I'm doing from a stem stitch to an outline stitch. I don't really know. I get confused. All I know is that if I don't do that, it's not going to look good. Because you're going to be kind of fighting that corner. I will show you. I will actually do this maintaining the floss on the right side instead of switching. And then I'll show you how to switch it. Oops. Okay. Oops. Didn't grab my needle in time. It just fell right down through that hole. Silly linen. Okay, so usually I would be switching my direction definitely by now, but I'm not going to, just to show you why I do it. So I'm still keeping this loop off to the right from that little flea's perspective, even though I'm turning left. I'm going to try to help it out a little bit by making my stitches a little shorter. And it looks okay. It's not like you can't do it this way. I just want to show you guys what I do instead. Actually, that really doesn't look bad. I think it helped that I changed the length of my stitches, which always helps when you're going around curves. So I'm just going to finish this here. Okay. Alternatively, I'll start a little bit up here on my S, so we don't have to take so long. So I have my loop to the right. And I think I'm going to switch here. So here's to the left. Oops. Where's my washing machine? I'm running some wash right now. It's making a really weird noise. I don't think you guys can hear it. I hope it's not broken. At least that's a quality problem to have. Okay, so I maintained that loop to the left for the remainder here. And we'll finish. So you can see what happens is you end up with one stitch that's kind of, I guess it's kind of weird because that's where the change in direction was. But I find that it handles the curves better, although this doesn't look bad. So really it's up to you. So I'm going to stitch the word stem stitch. And I'm actually, since you just watched me do the traditional stem stitch plenty of times, I'm going to do the non-traditional, and I'll be doing this. So if you're confused why I'm changing direction, this is why. All right, I am back. I am using variegated floss to actually do the lettering here on my hoop. Full 6-ply, full right off the skein. And you can see I'm doing the non-traditional stem here. It's a lot, I think it's faster and it's more intuitive. I use my needle to kind of push the previous stitch where I want it and then kind of tuck in there. I feel like I can manipulate the thread easier this way. With the traditional stem, I feel like it's kind of out of my control. So here, if I'm that little flea again, turning left, I'm taking my needle down on the left side. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the entire word. If this is super boring, please skip ahead to the next section. I'm going to do split stitch next. But just for those who need it, feel free to keep watching. So here I am going to, and now since we're turning to the right, I'm going to tuck on the right side. That's just how I like to do it. If that looks weird to you, don't do it that way. I kind of do it without thinking, so I wanted to make sure I addressed it so there wasn't any confusion later about why I'm changing the way I do this stitch over time. Oops, just got stuck on my screw there. That's the worst. Okay. So as I go through the different letters, regardless of which stitch I'm using, I kind of think about how I drew the shapes or the letters in this instant, and kind of, you know, just trace what I did in the order that I did it. It's a little different here for my T because I'm using this variegated floss. I don't want the color to change too much before I get back to it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do my T right now so that the color doesn't look weird. I'm just going right over my T, just like I would if I was using a pen. All right, and now I will continue. All right, so let's do some split stitch. There's really nothing new for me to say here. So a split stitch, if you don't know, it's called split stitch because after your first stitch, you're gonna come up through the previous stitch, splitting those fibers, and then going down a stitch length away. Ta-da! Same rules apply. You know, the smaller your stitch length, the easier it's going to be to go around corners, but of course, more stitches you have to do, more time it's going to take. So you got to find that balance. The more consistent your stitches are as far as stitch length, you know, they'll probably look more neat. You can use fewer strands if you want. It will be harder to split the fewer strands you have. So right now I'm using all 6 ply. So I'm trying to have, you know, 3 on one side, 3 on the other. When I split, of course, who knows if that's what I'm actually doing. Another way you can do split stitch, which I will show you right now, is instead of coming up, you can go down. So I'm going to come up a half a stitch length away and then go down through the previous stitches. So it's a little easier to see where you're going, obviously, when you can see where you're going. When you come up from the bottom, it's like, well, I think I'm splitting my stitch. I don't really know. I can't see my needle. So it's up to you if you want to do this way or the traditional way. Either way, you get kind of a braided look. It's basically just like a chain stitch, except that you're splitting instead of actually creating that chain. So if you did chain stitch with 3 ply, it would look very similar to this. I think it looks a little different when you do it from the top like I'm doing versus how I started. I'm going to switch back actually. Because when you come down from the top, you kind of squish your stitch, versus when you come from the bottom, I don't know if it fluffs it, but it doesn't squish it. So you have a little more puff. Oops. Speaking of puff, what did I just do? There, that's gone. I actually can see a little bit of a difference. It's very subtle between coming up through to split versus going down through to split. But there you go. That's what split stitch is going to look like. I'll finish that up and then meet you for chain stitch. All right, let's do some chain stitch. So I'm kind of a liar. I'm going to do reverse chain stitch. If you want to see me do the regular chain stitch to do a line, please see one of my other videos. Probably the heart sampler would be a good one. I can link it in the comments so you guys can find that easier. I just find reverse chain to be easier, so that's what I'm going to do. So to start, I just do a little tacking stitch. I'm using a full ply. And why I'm starting from the top here of my letter while I've started all the other ones from the bottom, I don't know. Alright, here's my little tack. It's probably too big. It's okay. I'm going to go stitch length away. And I'm going to tuck under that tack. And go back down that hole I just came up out of. And I pulled it too tight. There we go. And again, go up a stitch length away. And instead of going under the tacking stitch, I'm going to go under my previous chain stitch. So I'm not piercing the fabric here, I'm just tucking under. And then going back down that same hole. So I love how this stitch looks when used for lettering. I do not always have the patience to do it. Here I'm going to go the opposite way. The other stitches, I don't know if you noticed, I went from the top side down. It's just because it's easier on my wrist. There's no, it doesn't matter which way you go. It's not going to make a difference in how your stitches look. So yeah, I love how this looks. It gives a really nice thick line. It handles curves just beautifully. But you can see how long it's taking me. I'm sure with more practice I could go faster. I'm also making these stitches very small, just for you guys. Also, if I wasn't using this clamp, I'd be able to move my hoop around more, which would also make my life a little easier. What are you eating? That's not food. Please don't eat craft supplies, okay? Let's see, I have a knot. I have a knot. Hold on. Okay, I got it. Oh, and I also got a cat. She's back. Hey, Go-Go, can you stay down there, please? I'll pet you when I'm done, okay? So let's see, what can I tell you about using chain stitch or detached chain stitch for lettering? Small stitches, you know, you've heard this before, it's the same information. Small stitches are good. You can change up how many ply you're using. You can actually whip any of these stitches. I know I just showed you that for the, oh god, what are you doing on my lap? Sorry, kitty. I know I showed you the whipping for the back stitch, but you can actually whip any of these stitches if you want to add more texture and color. So that's it. So I'm going to keep going, and that's it. Maybe when I get to something more interesting down here, I'll show you guys that. But if you got it, go ahead and skip ahead. The next stitch is going to be couching. Oh, actually, I'll show you something right now. So here I'm at the end, so I have to start a new tacking stitch here, so that I can do my H. And it's up to you, like I'm starting at the bottom, you could, alternatively, you could start it at the top. It depends on which direction you want these stitches to go. I kind of regret starting at the bottom. It probably would have looked cooler from the top, but whatever. Play with it. see how you like it. So once I get to the top of this H, I'm going to have to start again to do the hump of that H, right? I don't just keep going on this chain, obviously. If you had your text like perfect cursive where, you know, all the letters are attached, you might get away with it, depending on what letters. So that's it. So I wanted to show you another way to start your back chain stitch. Is a reverse, is that what it's called? Is that what I've been calling it, guys? I don't remember. So basically you do your first stitch as a regular chain stitch. That way you can make this tacking stitch that's going to be kind of the end. You can make it really tiny then, because sometimes I know when I do this, my first, that little tacking stitch can be too big and then my line isn't consistent. Like see here, how my tacking stitch like makes it really skinny. So here, I'm able to make it a little smaller. Do whatever works for you. All right, so let's go ahead and look at couching for lettering. So my letters actually got kind of warped. I took this fabric out of the hoop and then put it back in and didn't have the tension exactly the same, so stuff kind of got weird. Which is why I don't like lettering. Or at least why I don't like lettering on stuff that I'm going to have to move around. A way to avoid that would be to use like an interfacing, like a stabilizer. So there's like that lightweight iron-on stabilizer you can use that'll help keep your fabric from shifting if you're gonna move it around later. So I did not do that. So I kind of had to correct some of my letters so they don't look quite so funky. They still look kind of funky, but it's all good. Okay, so for couching, I'm gonna couch this crazy variegated thread. So I'm gonna go up at one end, down at the other end of my letter, and then I'm going to keep a little slack here that I will be working with, and then I'm going to just come up at the next spot I'll be coming up at, which is here, just to keep this floss out of the way so I don't get a big tangly mess. I think that's kind of part of the difficulty with couching. It's not that difficult, it's just that it can get a little complicated using 2 strands of floss. I think that might intimidate people, or if they struggle with any weird tangly issues on the backside, that can get to be a mess. So here I'm going to couch with this green floss. You can use different ply for this. One thing I like to do sometimes is I'll use like a full ply, then I'm going to couch, and then by full ply I mean like a full 6-stranded, and then use a single ply to tack, so like you barely even see it. So it looks kind of cool. Okie doke. So basically I'm just gonna tack this floss along my lettering. When I use cotton fabric, I'll actually go up and come down in the same hole. It's a little risky to do that with linen because I have these large holes, and the reason I know this is because I just tried to do a demo like that and it was a total ridiculous disaster and I had to start over. So this is actually couching take 2. So yeah, I've never tried to couch on linen before, so there you go. I learned something today. Okay, I've actually never done couching for lettering either. I've done it for like vines and stuff, so it shouldn't be any different, right? Well, hello, Miss Boots. She doesn't think it'll be any different. So there we go. There's my first little couching stitch. And let's see, I'm going to be up here, I think. So same rules apply. You could think of the distance between couching stitches kind of like the distance between our other stitches that we've been using for lettering. Like, you know, how big is your back stitch? You can have that be the distance between your couching stitches here. And it's up to you if you want them to be perfectly spaced, or maybe you want, maybe you don't. I don't know. You know, when I have, like here, it's not as curvy in this part of this C that I drew, and so I don't need them as close. But will that look funny to change the distance? I don't know. It's up to you. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to follow along, and when I get to the end of my C, I'm just going to pull that slack. This is going so much better this time. Okay, I'm going to pull my slack, and I'm going to add one more stitch right here. This looks all Christmassy. There we go. Ta-da! Okay, so, and once again, you're going to think of this thread as like following the lines of how you actually drew. So this one's going to go up, around, and then it's going to loop there, and then it's going to do the U, and then it's going to do the C, and then, yeah, it technically, I did not lift my pen up the whole time when I did this. So I could do this whole thing to the end. We'll see how, if that's how I actually do it. But so for now, I'm just gonna, I won't actually put this thread down anywhere. I don't know where I want it down yet. We'll see. So I'm gonna keep going, and once I get to something interesting, I'll pop back in. Boots? What are you doing? Here's Boots. You're the worst. But I love you. You want to say hi? No. Okay. Okay, I'm at the top of my O, so I just wanted to show you how this is going to look, because I'm going to do a kind of a tight curve and then go over my previous line. I'm just kind of making this up as I go, to be perfectly honest. Let's see, I'll do one right here. This should be good. The nice thing about this this hoop stand that I'm using is for couching it is nice to have both hands. You can see I'm definitely using my left hand to manipulate the floss, which I would not be able to do if I wasn't using a stand. So yeah, sometimes they're good. So I'm just going over like this. So I'm kind of, you can see I kind of manipulate the texture, or the tension, excuse me, as well as the direction. So here I will go up. So this is weird. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go up, and then I need to go right back down. What should I do? Guess I will just go right back down. Let's see how this works. I'll go here. It looks okay. That works. Awesome. So that's it. I don't think I have anything else weird coming up. In case I didn't mention it before, I don't think I did. If you need to dot some eyes, you could just do a French knot. You could do a little seed stitch, whatever you want. So don't forget to dot your eyes. All right, we are at the end here. I just have satin left to do. There's obviously other stitches you can use for lettering, but these are just the ones that I prefer, the ones that I would actually bother doing, the ones I like the look of. So if none of these are doing it for you, please look around and find something that does work for you. So I am starting by doing a backstitch outline of my S. We will definitely only be doing the S out of the whole letter here. Satin stitched lettering is gorgeous, but it's also very time consuming. So it's really up to you if it's worth the time to do it. And you don't have to do an outline like this. I'm just showing you an option. If you want to know more about satin stitch, I do have a blog post where I talk about it and about how many strands of floss you should use. And I mean, the gist is that it's up to you depending on what kind of look you want. Here I'm going to use a full strand of our 6-stranded embroidery floss just because, you know, it's going to go a lot faster. If you want that super satiny look without any texture, you know, like a really calm lake, you know, you're going to need to use the single strand. And right now, how I'm doing this outline, I am using the full strand, but you don't have to. You can use half, or like if you used 1 ply, I think it would still be useful because it would help you keep your edges sharp, but you wouldn't get as much as of a raised look. But in that blog post I just mentioned, I have some examples of, you know, I take a single shape and I do it in a bunch of different versions of satin stitch. So I use 1 through 6 ply. I do some that are padded. I do some that are outlined, just to kind of see, you know, how much of a difference do these different techniques actually make in your finished satin stitch. And I was kind of surprised to see, you know, definitely a big difference with the number of ply you use. So go check that out. I'm going to just finish this outline and then I will start the satin stitch. So I made it back around and now I'm going to start my satin stitch. So I'm going to do, come up on the outside of my outline and go back to the other outside of my outline. I'm starting in the center of my shape. That's just what we do with satin stitch. The reason for that is it helps us maintain stitch direction. However, my stitch direction is going to be changing over time. So I'm going to come over here and add another satin stitch. And then over here and add another satin stitch. So you can see how the general rule is that I'm going perpendicular to the line. So if you were that little flea traveling along this S and that little track there, your satin stitches will cross exactly in front of your path, like perpendicular, like railroad tracks. Which means it's changing over time, obviously. So let's see. I'm going to start from the center now. So how do you change direction? It's a very good question. I have from here to there to change direction. So what I'm going to do is keep, when I come up from the top here, I'm going to make sure I come up super close to the previous stitch. And then on this side, I'm going to go a little further away, a little more of a gap. I definitely don't want an actual gap because then I'll have a hole in my lettering. I'm going to do the same thing. You can see it's already tilting in that direction. And the same thing. I came up very close. And here, as far away as I can get without having a gap. And you can see we're pretty much already there. That's it. Gonna need one extra stitch here. You may even have to overlap to handle those curves. Now, I did not do a really great job here, guys. Doing the outline is supposed to help with those raggedy outlines. I think part of my problem here is I'm working on linen. Part of my problem here is that I am using a full strand of floss. Part of my problem here is that I'm not taking my time because I don't want to have to be here all day. And part of the problem is it's just the nature of this stitch. It's really hard to get it perfect. So there you go. Also be careful here. I'm letting this floss just kind of lay here. I'm not pulling super tight. That'll help with any puckering that goes on of your fabric. Doing satin stitch lettering takes a lot of stitches. So every extra stitch you add is another opportunity to screw up your fabric. So really be aware of your tension. Make sure that your fabric is as tight as you can get it on your hoop. If you need to bind your hoop or wrap your hoop with fabric or whatever you need to do to make sure that your fabric's super tight in there. I see a lot of people tagging me in their pictures with some crazy loose fabric. I'm like, that looks hard. That looks way harder. You got fabric floppy in there. That should not be floppy fabric. it should be literally drum tight, like you can tap it with your finger and you'll be able to hear it. So that will definitely help. That got twisted and weird. Okay. So you can see how this takes pretty much all day. It looks cool though, huh? It's all raised and shiny. And you know, if you're doing very small font, this would be the worst possible stitch you could use. For small fonts, I would recommend using backstitch with just a ply or two. That's for like really tiny handwriting. I think that's my only major suggestion. Everything else, you know, works for medium size or large. I was thinking about that with the couching, like if you could do smaller couching, it would be challenging. But if you did like a single ply and then tacked it down with a single ply, how small could you get? You would not want to do that on linen. Oh my goodness, that would be a disaster. The tricky thing with linen is that it's already got these little holes for you. It's definitely possible to stab in between them if you must. It's weird because it's like a looser weave than cotton, but it's sometimes can be more stiff. It's not very intuitive. Okay, so I'm at the end of my shape here. I have like a weird little gap I'm going to fill in right here. And then I feel like at the top of the S I missed something. Like I feel like there's a hole right here. I'm going to fill that in. I don't know what I did. And I'm out of floss, and I think you get the idea. I'm going to finish this. Actually, I feel like there's a hole here. Something weird happened, so I'm going to fill in that gap. Oh, there's a lot of thread going in through here, so it's pretty tight. Look at that. Well, that's it, guys. I think that's all I need to say. I'm going to finish working my S. Man, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to finish the rest of the word. I will finish my couching, but that's it. So if you have any questions, please leave them below. If you found me on YouTube and not on my blog post, please go check out the blog post that coordinates with this video. I'll include photos and text, and yeah, that's it. All right, thanks, guys.